Good morning, and welcome to another Seize the Day. Today is Wednesday, July the 17th, and we get another opportunity to spend this morning together. Trust you guys are waking up feeling refreshed and ready to begin a new day. Nice, beautiful blue sky here, a little less humidity than normal, and we'll take it. But it's definitely been a heat wave over these past few kind of weeks, hasn't it? Trust that wherever you're tuning in from, that you'll find the day productive, and that our time today would also be a source of great encouragement for you. We're in a new series. It's called Songs of Ascent, and it's based on the Psalms from 120 through 134. The Psalm this week, 131, where David says, "My eyes are not, my heart is not proud, O Lord, and my eyes are not haughty. I do not concern myself with things too wonderful for me. But as a weaned child with its mother, so is my soul before you. O Israel, put your hope in the Lord now and forevermore." And the whole context of this psalm, right, is one in which David has come to terms with his own pride, his own ambitions, right, his own self-importance, and recognizes that his posture before God should be one where his heart is like a weaned child. And a weaned child doesn't go to his mother because it needs something to eat. A weaned child with his mother comes because it's looking for comfort, it's looking for support, it's looking for love. And that's David with his heart towards God. So I thought it would be interesting to take this topic then of pride and see it worked out in another passage of Scripture. And to do that, I thought it would be great for us to take a look at a passage that's found in Daniel chapter 3. And so if you turn with me there this morning, I hope that you'll be blessed by the reading of the word, and also just as we spend some time together. Yesterday, we ended with chapter 2 in Daniel, where the king is really disturbed by a dream that he has had. Can't get any rest. It is so confusing to him. He doesn't know what to make of it, and so he makes this, you know, criteria for those who were the wisdom makers, right? The those who would interpret dreams, right? He tells them, "Listen, I'm not going to tell you what I dreamt, but because if you're really a soothsayer, then you should know what it is that I'm thinking, and I want the interpretation of this dream. So not only do you have to interpret my dream, but you also have to tell me what the dream was. And if you're unable to do that," he says, "then it's toast for you. I'm gonna take you out." And so they're shocked. They're saying, no other king has ever asked us to do anything like this. And but King Nebuchadnezzar, he doesn't care. Remember, King Nebuchadnezzar is the one who led this charge against Jerusalem, where it not only overran the city, but as he led the Babylonian armies, they would destroy the temple and they would place in exile the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And so this is not a very nice guy, and he's used to getting his own way. And an interesting sideline here is if you read chapter 1 of the book of Habakkuk, you get a description of the Babylonians and how fierce and unrelenting they are. And so here in this passage then, King Nebuchadnezzar puts out this challenge, and Daniel prays with his friends, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. And in their prayer, God gives them a revelation of what it is that the king dreamt, and God gives the interpretation. So King Nebuchadnezzar, after David does this for him, falls prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. The king said this to Daniel in Daniel chapter 2, verse 47. It says, the king said to Daniel, surely your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, a revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery. Right? And what was that mystery? The king had dreamt of this huge statue, had a head of gold and a chest of bronze, whose legs and arms were made of iron, and whose feet was a mixture of iron and clay. And that's kind of where we get our English expression, right? He had feet of clay, because it's not a very stable. All those metals, strong, resilient. Not so much with clay. Clay is going to get brittle, and so the very foundation of this statue is left wanting, isn't it? And so when the interpretation comes, Daniel says the various elements of this statue are representative of kingdoms. He says, you, King Nebuchadnezzar, are the head. You're gold. And everything that's going to come after you is going to be more and more inferior. And eventually they're all going to pass away as well. So no doubt King Nebuchadnezzar likes this dream, right? And he's looking at himself now like, hey, I'm the top dog here. And so what does he do? In verse 48, he places Daniel in a high position, lavished many gifts on him, made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon, and placed him in charge of all of its wise men. And not only did he do this for Daniel, but it says at Daniel's request, right? Daniel now, he's placed in this position, asks the king, says, hey, how about my buddies, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? And they're placed as administrators over the province of Babylon, while David himself remained at the royal court. So here, David, who, if you remember the story from chapter 1, is taken as an exile from the defeated Jerusalem. Judah now is overcome. Daniel refuses to bend the knee to the customs of Babylon, has his heart and mind still on the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, right? So he's not compromising. And yet, look what God does. In the midst of all of this turmoil, in the midst of a situation that is absolutely terrible, God found a way to elevate Daniel. And now Daniel is in a position to do good for all of those exiles who have come out of Egypt. They have one of their own in the royal court in Daniel, and his presence there should help, right? Well, that expression that we went back to here in verse 47 of chapter 2, when the king Nebuchadnezzar says to Daniel, surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of lords, the revealer of mysteries. Well, you hear that, right? And what does that do for you? It kind of intimates maybe that Nebuchadnezzar is coming around, right? Okay. Well, let's move on now to Daniel chapter 3, because our whole conversation here is right about pride and about the posture of being humble and surrendered, right? And being hopeful, because God is the one who holds this future. So let's take a look here. It says in chapter 3, it says, King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 90 feet high, 9 feet wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Okay, so from this dream that brought him so much trouble that he under the penalty of death, he's asking people to give him an interpretation so that he can find some rest. Daniel gives him this dream, tells him that all the kingdoms, including even his, is going to fall. That the stone that brought the destruction to this temple was not made of human hands, right? It's saying it's of God, and from that stone, a kingdom is going to come that will not end. This is all part of this interpretation. What King Nebuchadnezzar takes out of that is, Oh, so you're saying that I'm the head of gold? It's like he didn't listen to anything else that Daniel was saying to him. There was nothing that put a check in his spirit. It's kind of like that old movie with Jim Carrey when he looks at the girl who is beautiful and he's kind of dorky and he's he's asking her, look, what are you interested in me? And she says, not in a million years, right? And he's saying, so you're saying there's a chance? King Nebuchadnezzar is just seeing what he wants to see. Don't you see? Like he heard that in this whole statue, the golden head was him. And so what does he do? He makes an image of gold 90 feet high, almost 100 feet high, and 9 feet wide. He sets it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. And what does he do? He summons all of the people, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, all the people from the royal court and all the other provincial officials. So all of the leadership across this empire, they have to come to the dedication of this image he had set up. And not only do they come, he goes on, it says that he assembles them all, and then he stands before them, right? All of those within his royal court. And what is he doing? He's asking for a pledge of loyalty. In verse 4, he says, then the herald loudly proclaimed, this is what you are commanded to do, O peoples, nations, and men of every language. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of of all kinds of music, all the peoples, nations, men of every language fell down, and they worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Now, did we not just learn that Daniel was placed in a position to rule over all of Babylon? Did he not just give positions of administration to his friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Well, yeah, that's exactly right. But notice this in verse 8, it says, at this time some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You have issued a decree, O king, that everyone who hears, the music, right, and they need to fall down, worship the image of gold. And that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They pay no attention to you, O king. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold that you have set up. So, where is all of this humility on the side of King Nebuchadnezzar? He hears what he wants to hear. He hears, hey, I'm the head of gold. He erects this nearly 100-foot statue of pure gold, expects everybody to bow down and demonstrate this loyalty, but not Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And then they're called out. I mean, come on, we know people like this, right? They delight in just trying to be in the know. They're out there, causing trouble, instigating. Come on, it's not only in this story, it's in every story. It happens in families, it happens in work, right? It happens in church. It happens wherever you go. There are always those who are just seeking to tweak the nose, right? To just get in good, to just embed themselves in a position where people would look at them with a little bit more graciousness. So here are these, astrologers. They're coming. They're trying to make the Jews look bad. They're calling them out. Hopefully that would endear them more to the king. And what happens? The king gets furious. Look at verse 13. He says he becomes furious with rage. Nebuchadnezzar summons Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar says to them, "Is it true that you don't serve my gods or worship the image of gold that I have set up?" Now, when you hear the music, right? When you hear it, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you'll be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? I think again, there's a ton of references from Daniel that have found their way into our common vocabulary. I gave you one about feet of clay, right? That comes from this story. Did you catch another one that's here about facing the music? Like he says, oh, he's got to face the music, right? That's this music. This is what it's talking about. This is where that expression comes from. Facing the music. Yeah. Like, listen, if you don't bow down and worship me, then I'm going to throw you into this fiery furnace. And then he's acting like, well, who's going to save you from me? Like, I'm the power. That's all he got from what Daniel said. He didn't realize that each one of those kingdoms, including his, would fall under God's kingdom. Instead of being humbled before the Lord, he just becomes more arrogant. He thinks of himself way more highly than he should. But he's not prepared for what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are going to do, because their response is this. Look at verse 16. They say, "Oh, Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the God of gold that you have set up." This is the equivalent, right, of Jesus on the Mount of in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he prays and says, "Lord, let this cup pass from me, but if not, your will be done." This is Jesus teaching his disciples to pray, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." It is recognizing that God's will and his purpose reign supreme and sovereign. And there is no capriciousness in God. He is described with the attributes of justice and mercy and love. He is for us, never against us. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are more than willing to put their lives in God's, because they know they're going to win either way. Either they're going to be delivered, or their hope is in the Lord, that ultimately God will save them. And so that's pretty bold for these guys, right? Speaking to the king has to save face. He's now not going to let Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego get the best of him. And so what happens? He becomes furious. Verse 19. And his attitude towards them changes, right? He ordered the furnace heated, 7 times hotter than usual. He commands some of his strongest soldiers in the army to tie them up and throw them into this blazing furnace. And so these men, notice they're just wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, clothes, like they're bound and thrown into this blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent and the furnace so hot that the flames of the fire, it killed the very soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They got way too close to the fire, and it consumed them. And the 3 men, firmly tied, fell into this blazing furnace. Well, you would think it's all over, right? But King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, he says, "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire?" And they replied, certainly, O king. And he looks again and he says, look, I see four men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the fourth looks like a son of the gods. Well, we're not ever told who that one is that was walking in that furnace. Many believe that this is an appearance of the pre-incarnate Jesus, right? Because Jesus was in the beginning. He was with God. He is God. And if Jesus was behind creation, right, and the one who holds all these things together, it is not a stretch for us to think that Jesus may have been the very one that was walking in this fiery furnace with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so Nebuchadnezzar then approaches the opening of the blazing furnace and shouts out and calls them to come out. And sure enough, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego come out of the fire. And all of the leadership, right? The satraps, prefects, governors, the royal advisors, everybody crowds around them. And I love the detail of this story. It says, they saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair on their heads singed, and their robes were not scorched. And listen to this detail, they didn't even smell like the fire. There was no smell of fire on them. So would you think that that is a complete deliverance? Like, who is showing themselves sovereign over this situation? They don't come out, gasping, coughing, singed, burnt. No. They come out completely unharmed, as if the incident never even occurred. Now, what would happen if you were there? That fire was so intense that it killed the ones who were throwing them into the fire. And yet, God's sovereign hand protects them. So what does Nebuchadnezzar say? Nebuchadnezzar says, praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command, and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces, their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way. And then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. You do see, right, then, that God is able to save even in the most, threatening of circumstances. Who is absolutely showing sovereign power here? The interesting thing, though, is Nebuchadnezzar still hasn't learned the lesson. He's just thinking that their God is a God, one notch higher than his God. And so consequently, he still thinks that he's in control, right? So in a way, God uses this whole circumstance to do what? Not only to make his name great, he does it to, yes, rescue Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But again, now they are placed in a position, their relationship with God is put on a platform for everybody to see, and they go back like Daniel, and they are part of the ruling administration of this foreign king. You remember, there is a text that's found in Jeremiah 29. You know these texts, right? It says, I know the plans I have for you, not to harm you, but to prosper you, to give you a hope in the future. That's a text that God is giving to the nation of Israel before they got carried off into exile by King Nebuchadnezzar's army. God's saying to them, look, I know what the future holds for you. So if you're going and you're part of and you're faithful to me, I know how to protect you, even in this foreign land. And he says, so when you go into that country, I want you to pray for that. I want you to pray for the city in which you find yourself. I want you to settle down. I want you to plant vineyards, right? I want you to give your sons and daughters in marriage to each other. I want you to be fruitful and multiply, even in Babylon. And this is one of those ways that God's doing that. God is protecting them even while they're in exile. And while there were probably many things that just, there was no temple, there's the heartbeat of the nation has been literally wrenched out. There are no more feast days. There is no more gatherings. God, in this way, is still looking out for them and providing for them, because it's not going to be long before the kingdom of Babylon is going to fall to the Medes and the Persians. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. It's enough for us today to recognize who is in control, who is the one, whether he say, as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego testified, if he saves us, great. If he doesn't, great. Because we're not worshiping anyone other than him. And God demonstrates his power over all of creation. They don't even have the smell of fire on them. My friends, God is making those same kinds of promises to us today. It is ultimately his will and his purpose that orders our steps. There are sometimes we're going to have to walk through the valley of the shadow of death, but we shall fear no evil, for he is with us, right? He will set a table for us, even in the presence of our enemies. And surely goodness and mercy shall follow us all the days of our life, until we dwell in the house of the Lord forever. It's a great story. But again, what's the lesson that Nebuchadnezzar is learning? He likes the news of Daniel, and he appreciates Daniel's ability that God gave him. But he's not bending the knee to God. He's not recognizing that he has to bend the knee. No. It makes him proud. He builds this great statue. And even when, his edict is completely turned upside down, he recognizes that there's a power here, but it's not enough for him to bend his knee. And so we're going to move on to the next part of the story, which is in Daniel chapter 4. But we're going to have to do that tomorrow. I want to thank you so much for, again, being a part of our study. I hope these lessons, they just sink down deeply into our heart. Go out, seize the day. We serve a God who is for us, not against us. Nothing can thwart the will and purposes of God. We could rest confidently in him. Prayerfully, we'll see each other again tomorrow. Until then, seize the day and never forget that God is good all the time.